Miss Liz, tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time, yeah, Miss Liz, tea time, yeah, making a difference, one cup at a time, tea time. So be sure to grab your tea, grab a seat, and tune in to Miss Liz, tea time. Making a difference, one cup at a time. Tea time, yeah. Tea time, time.
Well, good morning and welcome to Tea Time. That's right, we're back with a full new week, 3 new huge guests. That's right, and this morning we're going to be talking about porn addiction. So we do have a trigger warning for anyone out there who may be triggered. Please do not tune into this show. I deeply will understand if you cannot tune in. We will have trigger warnings going on during the show. We are talking about an adult content discussion this morning, which is really needed, and we need the awareness out there. I am joined with the amazing Joshua Shea. He is a pornographic addiction expert, certified betrayal trauma coach, all of that good stuff. We're going to talk about the heavy, deep stuff this morning. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, eat your breakfast. Don't forget to get your breakfast this morning. And we're going to get started. So we're going to do all of the good stuff. We're going to do disclaimers, and we're going to do bios, and then we're going to get Joshua in here, and we're going to spill a good, strong TEA Miss Liz style. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz, myself, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard permission to see your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that the content brought forward for any Tea Time show hosted by myself, Miss Liz, is always brought forward in good faith. However, may bring forward dialogues and opinions that are not representative of my platform. The facts and information are perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All Tea Time guests and audience participants are responsible for using their good judgment in taking any action that may relate to the discussion. The content brought forward may include discussion for some where they may be emotionally at risk. It is significant to know that this show is engaging in discussion forums only to offer and inspire awareness and connection, and is not providing therapeutical advice. If you have any questions about the disclaimer or the panelist discussion, you may freely contact me, Miss Liz, through my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com. Moving forward, should you choose to voluntarily participate in today's show in any aspect, I myself, Miss Liz, welcomes you. And should you decide that the show is not made for you at this time, I respect your wishes and will see you at a later show at a later date and time. And again, all tea times this year are done on Thursday, unless it's a rescheduled tea time, then it'll be Monday or Tuesday. Now, a little bit on my guests. This morning, I have Joshua Shea. He's a pornographic addiction expert, certified betrayal trauma coach, therapeutical disclosure specialist, and the author of 4 books about pornographic addictions, including I'm reading this book about porn addiction for a friend in 2022. He's also, other books by Shea includes He's a Porn Addict, Now What? Porn and the Pandemic, How 3 Months in 2020 Changed Everything, released July 2020, and The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About, How I Let My Pornographic Addiction Hurt People and Destroy Relationships in 2018. Prior to him admitting his 24-year addiction to pornographic in 2014, Joshua was a prominent magazine publisher, award-winning journalist, film festival founder, and politician in Central Maine. So let me get Josh in here. I'm going to grab some tea. I'm going to take a sip. I'm going to sit back. So let me get Joshua in here so he can get spilling some of this TEA this morning. So welcome, Joshua.
Good morning. How are you?
I am good. So, Josh, give us a little bit on the little boy to the big boy, and then we're going to get into all of the good stuff.
Absolutely. As you said, my name is Joshua Shea. I was a pornography addict for 24 years. I was also an alcoholic for 22 years. And 9 years, 3 months ago, I ultimately made the decision that it was time to uh, get clean and sober. So for the last 9 years, 3 months, I've been clean and sober. I've been relapse free. And I have been both learning why I became addicted to these substances, learning what might have been able to be done to not have me be on them, and then sharing that with the public as much as I can. A few years ago, I was mainly doing speeches along with my writing. But as we all know, the pandemic came around, and suddenly nobody wanted to hear you give a speech because nobody was there to unlock the building. Uh, and so a friend of mine who is a licensed marriage and family therapist suggested I look into coaching. They thought that I'd be good at that. And ironically enough, it turned out I fell in love with this. And now I spend my days, if I'm not writing or I'm not doing the educational component on interviews like this, I spend my days uh, helping people who have pornography addiction get through that. And I also help their partners who have the betrayal trauma work their way through that as well. And that's kind of what my life has become, which, was very surprising because for years and years, like you mentioned, I was a journalist, I was a politician, I did a lot of other things. But once I finally admitted that I had had these addictions for so long, that was the point where, I started looking myself in the mirror, being truthful and living my truth. And I've never looked back and I've never been happier or healthier.
So, Joshua, the question I have for you this morning is when did you realize that it became an addiction?
Um, I started looking at pornography, hardcore pornography, and became addicted basically almost instantly when I was 12 years old. And I didn't, and this was, you're going back to the late 80s at this point, when we didn't really talk about this stuff very much. I looked at pornography every day and drank just about every day. And I remember one day when I was 16 or 17 years old, I was on the soccer team in high school. And one day after practice, we went to a friend's house, and a friend had a pornographic videotape and put it into the VCR, and everybody started goofing on it and laughing and just behaving and treating it so different than I ever did. And that's when I realized that things were very different for me than they were for them. And it's ever since that point that I've recognized my use was outside that of the ordinary. And I think after I got out of high school and started to have a few girlfriends, and a few of those girlfriends were anti pornography. And I tried to quit while I was with them, but couldn't, that I recognized this was truly different for me than most people.
So, Joshua, you said at the age of 12. So, where did you get access at that age?
That was actually from an older cousin. He wanted to show me how cool he was. He was 14 or 15. He had stolen these magazines from a bookstore, if you remember what those are. And he wanted to look cool in his younger cousin's eyes. So he brought them to me. The thing that he didn't know was that I had been sexually abused when I was younger. And what happened was, this was at the hands of a babysitter and her family. Um, what he didn't realize was the moment that he showed me those photographs, something clicked in me because it was the first time I had ever seen something like that. Aside from what had happened to me, and what I was forced to do to other children and adults and whatnot, and it was the first time I saw photographs of similar behavior, and I think that normalized it for me in that instance. Oh my goodness, here's what happened to me, but now it's on the pages of a magazine, and here are adults doing it. And for some reason, I'm really intrigued by this. Um, it wasn't until years later in recovery that I realized this was a normalizing of what happened to me. And this was my first step of actually repressing those memories, because it didn't take long. And I think pornography was part of the vehicle by which I repressed those negative memories for so many years. Um, that really was it. At 12 years old, it was like, okay, I'm normal. What happened to me when I was younger? That's normal, I guess. And the intrigue with it, I found a convenience store that would sell me alcohol. I found a video store, one of those mom and pops that would rent me adult movies starting at the age of about 13, 14, and never looked back after that because I never had any issue with access after that.
Well, and that's the thing, and Josh. I'm really happy that you came forward about. I'm really sorry that you were abused. As
Thank
a
you.
survivor of abuse myself, I we do try to understand, right? Because
Yeah.
we get abused at such a young age, so we're wondering why do we have these feelings? Why do we, uh, and I really want all my listeners and viewers out there to understand that this is going to be a trigger warning show. We are going to get deep. I'm going to dig deep with Joshua because I feel that we need to have these stories out there. We have to be aware of why we do what we do, why we get into the addictions we get into. Once we understand the root cause of why we do what we do, then we can heal ourselves. So, Joshua, thank you for sharing that about your childhood and that. Um, I myself might even get triggered because I was abused at a young age. But, Joshua, back 20, 30 years ago, it was so easy to get access to all of this stuff. And now there's more guidelines, there's more restrictions, but it's just as powerful now because now it's being turned into like a game where 30 years ago it was mom and pop shops where you went and got a video. If somebody knew you, oh yeah, it's okay, you can watch
Yep.
that video, I'll let you have it. Where now it's like show me ID, and they still have false IDs. So we really need to understand that 30 years ago was not the same as what it was today, you know?
No, but it is, in my opinion, it's even easier to get at, and it's easier to get at the really bad stuff because we give every 10 or 11-year-old the greatest porn computer ever created with a smartphone and
Yep.
send them out in the world and say good luck.
Yep. Without giving them the understanding of what the phone has access to, right?
Absolutely. And every movie I watched ended after an hour. The internet doesn't end. It's nonstop. So we are poisoning our youngest generation's minds with this stuff. It's, you know, I say to people that I may have had my monthly Playboy magazine before I should have been able to see that stuff. But in a Playboy magazine, I got my 50 photos a month, and then I had to wait for the next 50. And they were certainly not nearly as uh, hardcore and as extreme as what you were going to find on the internet today and what kids can be exposed at seeing today.
Well, and I think it's really important, Josh, like you said, like it doesn't shut off now. Where before you had to wait that 1 month to get the next magazine. Now it's constant. So, as an expert, how do you reach out to the younger generation on this matter?
Well, I when I coach, I don't personally coach anybody under 18 just because of all the liability and HIPAA and
Yep.
all that stuff. But when I do shows like this, when I do um, when I reach out through social media, and I've got quite a large following, I always think of that kid I was at 12 or 13. And I just think, what could I have heard? What could I have been told that maybe would have stopped me? I can't say anything would have necessarily stopped me, but nobody ever talked about this stuff back then. The only time anybody mentioned porn in the, mid or late 80s was to deny ever looking at it.
Yeah.
That was basically it. So I like to, try to at least tell these kids that if you're hitting puberty, it's natural to be curious about depictions of sexuality, but much like cigarettes, much like alcohol, while this stuff is legal, um, it isn't good for young minds. It isn't good for young people who are developing. It can teach you things that are incorrect. And ultimately, it's healthier if you stay away from it and make decisions later on when you're an adult if you want to watch it or not, because most people become addicted as children in their teens. And if you can just wait on this stuff, if you can understand that it is not real, it is a fantasy, um, you'll be better off. And those are all things that I was never told when I was 10, 11, 12, that maybe would have made a difference and wouldn't have made me an addict for 24 years. When I do this work, a lot of it is I think about the younger version of myself and what should I at least have been told? What should I have known? Yes, I became an alcoholic and I knew that was bad for me, but I was warned about all kinds of stuff and I didn't become an addict in that way. So I just wonder what could have been. And when I'm talking to people in public or I'm doing something like this, I'm always thinking about that young version of myself and what is that thing that I could have heard that might not have sent me down this road.
So we have a question here for you, Josh.
Mhm.
Is there healthy porn?
I don't think so. I think that, and I know that there are plenty of people who can look at pornography, who can use it as an aid when they are self satisfying, or maybe even when they're with a partner. There are far more people like that than there are who are addicts. But my issue is that most people don't recognize that it can go bad. Most people don't recognize that it can be more than just looking at naked people doing naked things. It can start the addiction process in your mind. It can start with, releasing the dopamine and the oxytocin and all those chemicals that eventually turn you into an addict. I think that's what people need to recognize. Um, that that's the unhealthy part when you cross over. But in reality, I've read probably 150 to 200 studies about pornography, all different areas. I've never read one where the summation says pornography is healthy. At best, you can hope that it doesn't cause problems, that it's not unhealthy, but I have never seen or read or heard any testimonial that has led me to believe that pornography in any way actually benefits your health.
So we have another question here, Josh. When was the last red flag for you to get help?
The last red flag for me to get help was a few days before I went to rehab for alcoholism. I was one third owner of a publishing company. I ran it day to day, but I had been drinking so much on the job that the other two-thirds ownership fired me. And then about 2 days later, my family, a few friends, a few other folks had a makeshift intervention for me, and that was really the sort of the last straw. And within a few days I was off to rehab in California for alcoholism, and then a few months after that I went to a rehab in Texas for intercourse and pornography addiction. um, So it was that moment of losing my job and then having my family to confront me that finally made me say, okay, I throw in the towel. I need help.
So, Josh, you're also a certified betrayal trauma coach. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, in my type of work, the person who has betrayal trauma is the partner of a porn addict, but they don't realize they have been the partner of a porn addict because usually in these relationships, this is usually husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. Early in the relationship, they establish that pornography is out of bounds. It's not allowed. It won't be part of their lives collectively or individually. And then one of the partners, quite often the male, will go ahead and continue to watch. And then after what can be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, the partner finds out that, oh my goodness, he is using pornography. And he has been using pornography straight through. This causes a lot of reactions. Number one is, how could this guy lie to me successfully for all this time? How could he hide this? If he can lie successfully, if he can hide this, what else can he lie about? What else is he hiding? So that creates a huge amount of doubt within the relationship. Then you've also got to deal with the idea that, wait, did he go and become a porn addict because I'm not enough? Am I not good looking enough? Am I not good enough in bed with him? Why did I do something that drove him to become a pornography addict? And then finally, on top of that, usually couples have so much of their lives enmeshed together that there's a fear of, oh my goodness, I'm with this guy who is this person I never even knew, and all of our finances are tangled up. We have kids together. What do I do now? I never pictured myself being with somebody like this, and I don't want to be with somebody like this, but we've got 3 kids and 2 cars and a mortgage, and what do I do now? That's really what hits somebody who has betrayal trauma, on top of the idea that this also forces previous traumas to resurface. So you're dealing with, in the moment, the fact that the last person you thought would betray you has just done that, and that causes feelings of, unresolved trauma that you may not have worked through when you were younger. So it's a little bit of dealing with the now, and it's a little bit of dealing with the past.
So, we have another question here for you, Josh. Have you ever worked with a female for a porn addict?
Absolutely. I deal with 3 of them right now, as a matter of fact. I've probably dealt with around a dozen during the 2 years that I've been doing uh, coaching. And there is actually very little difference between the coaching that a man and a woman gets. It's 98% the same. It's like if you are homosexual or bisexual, it's all porn, and we've all got working, boy and girl parts. So largely the treatment, regardless of gender or orientation, is the same.
We have another question. Out of all the people that you've coached, have any of them not been sexually abused?
Oh yeah, plenty of them, plenty of them. Uh, I would say all of them have dealt with some type of trauma, but not necessarily sexually. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional, spiritual. It can even be situational. We think about trauma, I believe, in most extreme terms. Trauma means that somebody, one of your parents beat the crap out of you when you were young. Trauma means that your Cub Scout leader molested you. When trauma is just unresolved pain. And that can be from divorce, that can be from lying, that can be from a death, that can be from so many different things. Trauma can spring up from anywhere, and it's important that people recognize that it's not just those giant, life-changing events that you see on television.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people are like, they have that mindset, right? That you had to have been beaten, you had to have been abused. Trauma, it could be a car accident, could be, a loss
Exactly.
of a pet. It's just like you said, unresolved pain. We don't know how to heal the pain, understand the pain, and understand that moment. Healing is a life journey. I always say, if somebody tells me I'm healed, I'm like, I'm not sure about that, because that's a life journey. That's a life job. When you deal with trauma, trauma is life. It doesn't mean that you're in it every day. It just means that you have steps to take for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
So, Josh, I want to talk about infidelity. Was
Mhm.
that ever an issue in your life?
In my life, no. And that's what's important to recognize for a lot of people is that infidelity and pornography addiction are two very different things. And ironically, the rate of men who are porn addicts and who practice infidelity is lower than that of men who are not porn addicts.
Oh, well, that's
However,
that's
however, if
interesting.
yeah, if you look at females who are porn addicts, the rate of them stepping outside of their relationship and cheating is more than double that of women who are non-porn addicts. So you kind of get both sides of the spectrum there, um, and we can come up with 101 different theories as why these things are. But yeah, they're the link between pornography and infidelity is tenuous at best. They are very different activities, and you don't see a lot of crossover there.
That is really interesting. Really, really interesting. Because we all think that, oh, they must have cheated, they must have went on to the other side, and it's not true. Even myself, I thought, like there's some kind of infidelity going on. They want somebody else, they're in tune to another. So what is the addiction like? How does the addiction feed you?
The addiction is not to naked people. The addiction is not to sex. That's just the vehicle by which I get what I need. And what I need are those chemicals that are created from when I look at pornography and when I would self pleasure to the pornography. I would get massive amounts of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins sent into the pleasure centers of my brain. And I learned that that felt really good. And we have to recognize that, the human body created these chemicals and activates these chemicals. It was supposed to be only when you were having intercourse. But then we learned with pornography, long, long time ago that you could circumvent this and you could get a very good feeling from self pleasuring to pornography. And then what happened about 25 years ago is that we were met with a world of high speed internet. And suddenly that meant an unending supply of pornography hitting you. And I, as a 20-year-old, I would see more pornography in one day than my grandfather would see in his entire lifetime. And that's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to get these chemicals flowing into you at that amount. That's when you start to cause essentially brain damage. You start to rewire how your brain works. And I can tell you the last several years of my addiction, I didn't care what was on the screen. I couldn't tell you 2 minutes after the ethnicity of the person that I was just looking at, or how many people I was just looking at, or what was really even on the screen because it didn't matter to me. I didn't care. I didn't get sexually excited by this stuff. I just needed to find whatever I could to get at my chemicals. That's all I wanted. This wasn't about fantasizing cheating on my wife. This wasn't about fantasizing having sex with the people I saw on the screen, as it is for a lot of people who are just casual users who use pornography as an aid in sexuality. if I was a gambling addict, I would have been gambling. If I was a food addict, I would have been eating. I was a porn addict, so I was looking at these naked people engaged in sexual activity, but I could have cared less. And that's the most important thing people have to recognize about the addiction, is that I'm not watching just because I really like watching sex. I'm watching because I'm getting this constant flow of essentially these mind drugs that after 20 plus years, I essentially need on a daily basis just to operate, just to focus, just to keep going. I didn't want to look at porn. I didn't want to have to self pleasure. I didn't want to do all that stuff, especially in the last several years of being an addict. But I had to, just to maintain moving forward. It had nothing to do with any exciting sexual activity or seeing any exciting sexual activity. That it was just the vehicle by which my pleasure chemicals were delivered. I could have cared less about porn at the time.
I think this is the first time I've ever heard anybody talk about the chemicals. A lot of other guests I've had another guest on season 3, Matt Sinkovics, who has porn to purpose. And you also use that phrase, porn to purpose. So let's talk about porn to purpose. What is the purpose of porn?
Well, I mean, I think that ultimately it depends who you are and what you need. Everybody may have a different purpose. And I tell people that I am not necessarily anti pornography, I am pro healthy sexuality. Um, the reality is, as long as cavemen could draw on cave walls, there have been depictions of pornography. As long as ancient, cultures were creating pottery and painting them, you can go to any museum in this world and look at the ancient medieval exhibit, and you're going to see some X-rated stuff on some of that pottery. The greatest sex manual that exists is still largely considered the Kama Sutra. That's hundreds of years old and comes from very conservative India, where pornography is actually outlawed right now online. Um, we have to recognize that the curiosity of depictions of sexuality is normal, especially for those people who are going through puberty, whose bodies are changing. And that's okay. And being interested and wondering what bodies are like, that's okay. It's just that we are not letting people know what this stuff can do to you the way that we do with so many other substances. That's why I consider myself an educator of this, more than anything else, is because people have not been taught what pornography can potentially do to you. For some people, it is a once a month release, and that's it. They're not addicted. It feels good for them. It doesn't create obsession in their mind. It's technically not truly unhealthy for people who use at that level. Um, but those people, along with the people who are addicts, probably have the exact same level of education about it. And that's the most important thing to me, is that people get educated and make the decision for themselves, because everything else we've tried hasn't really helped.
Yeah.
Shaming people isn't going to help. And I hate to say this, but the moral arguments against it, whether it's about the treatment of the actors or whether it's about the trafficking issues that come around with pornography, I don't think these have ever stopped anybody from truly using. I don't think that any social ill that is caused has really stopped anybody. Otherwise, this would have stopped in the 60s and 70s when people were marching against it. These kinds of arguments don't stop. People make their own decisions personally on how they're going to use pornography. And that's why I think we need to do a better job educating, so people can decide for themselves how it's going to fit into their lives or not fit into their lives whatsoever.
We have a comment and a question here for you, Josh. I'm a sexual educated teacher for sex ed. How does Josh feel about coming into schools and speaking on this subject?
Um, I used to go into colleges all the time um, to talk about this subject. Um, and it was great, whether I was talking to a group of 12 or I was talking to a group of 1,200. I loved talking to colleges about this because I truly believe Generation Z is the one that is going to start to take this seriously, is the one that is going to change the world for the better when it comes to pornography. My grandparents were so, and my parents were so conservative. Then you get my generation, Generation X. We became much more liberal with sexuality, but we didn't really police anything. We just kind of let it happen. When we let it happen, it blew up in the millennials' faces. They're the ones who have it the worst um, because they dealt with high speed internet. They don't remember a world before the internet, but they were kind of the beta testers for this stuff. And now that we've had high speed internet for 20 years, 25 years, we can see the damage it does. We can manage we can measure the damage that pornography has done to these people. And now that we know, we are spreading information to Generation Z. They are taking this seriously. It's not, a kid of 13 years old in Generation Z isn't like I was, where I was just wondering where I could get my next pornography. They don't have any issues with where to get their next pornography, so they can learn deeper about it. They can take it more seriously. And looking at my client base as a coach, about half of it is Generation Z. And in a lot of ways, I think they take this more seriously as a problem than any other generation does.
We have another question here coming in from Australia. I'd like to know how Josh feels about porn as a new drug.
Well, I don't think porn itself acts as a drug. I think that the chemicals that it can produce in addiction definitely act as the drug. I mean, whether you are ingesting something into your system that is a true drug and it's affecting your brain, or you are short circuiting your own system and causing the chemicals within you to act like a drug, it doesn't really matter. What you are doing is basically falling prey to a substance, whether that substance is man-made in a laboratory or it is created within your brain. I don't know that that necessarily matters, because I felt like an absolute slave to my addiction. My mind was telling me most times during the day, when are you going to get your next fix? When are you going to get your next fix? You got to look at pornography. You got to see pornography sometime soon. You got to see it if you're going to feel okay. If you're going to feel normal, you've got to have this stuff in your system. And that is just constantly going on in your head all day long. So you get to the point where you will do things like, lie, steal, cheat, do whatever you need to do to get to these chemicals, just like a drug addict will lie, cheat, or steal to get to their heroin or fentanyl or whatever else that people are using these days for drug abuse. It is that strong of a pull. I can tell you that at its worst, I thought if I didn't get those chemicals into my system through the pornography, that I was literally going to die. It changes your brain chemistry. It gives you brain damage. um, Thankfully, in the long run you can come back from it, but addiction is a disease of the brain. And if you look at brain scans of somebody who has pornography addiction, the closest other brain you'll find is somebody who has cocaine addiction. That's
Uh-huh.
how strong the pull of pornography addiction is. It causes the kind of brain damage that cocaine addiction will cause. It's that strong.
Wow, that is strong. Um, Josh, I want to get into you have some incredible books out there as well. So let's talk about the books. What got you into writing?
Before I admitted that I had these problems, I was a journalist, an editor, and a publisher of newspapers and magazines for 25 years. So what happened one day was after I had returned from the rehabilitation center for porn and um, intercourse, I was at a bookstore looking for a book on porn addiction. And while I found books on addiction, while I found books that could deal with my alcohol issue, I didn't find anything about pornography. And the only thing that I could find on pornography online were these academic studies. And I don't mind reading academic studies. I'm the kind of geek that likes that. But I also know that there are the kind of geeks out there who enjoy reading Shakespeare for fun. I'll never be one of those people, much as I know most people will never read those academic journals. So I just thought to myself, with my writing background, with my writing ability, with knowing people in the publishing industry, maybe I could tell my story, and that would be a mainstream book out there. I could take what I learned and what I knew and also mix that with my own personal story. So I thought I would go out, I would write one book about my journey, and that would be my contribution to this world, and that would be it. I would go back to my regular life. After I wrote the first book, what surprised me was I didn't get the amount of messages or comments back from addicts that I thought I would, but I got 10 times the messages I thought I would from girlfriends, wives, even some moms saying, "Oh my goodness, you fixed yourself. How do I fix my guy?" And it was like, well, you can't. He needs to want to fix himself. So, but I'm so wrecked by this. I don't know who he's. And that's when I actually learned about betrayal trauma. And I found that fascinating because as a married man, my wife did go through some of it, but not a lot. And I met many women who were absolutely wrecked by this and realized that I think that more than any other addiction, pornography and intercourse addiction gets to a partner in a way that no other addiction can, gets to their self esteem, gets to their self image, and can wreck it in a way that doesn't happen with gambling addiction, doesn't happen with heroin addiction. I don't think there's anybody out there who is dating a gambling addict and wondering, did they become a gambling addict because I'm not pretty enough? Did my husband become a heroin addict because I'm not crazy enough in bed? I don't think people are asking themselves these questions, but when it comes to porn and intercourse addiction, it hits the partner like I have never seen an addiction hit a partner. So I teamed up with a licensed marriage and family therapist who's a friend of mine, and we wrote the second book, which was about betrayal trauma. And since then, there have been so many, interview requests. There have been so many, can you come and speak requests before the pandemic, that it just kind of took over my life. And I stopped doing full-time freelance writing. The only thing I've written in the last couple of years have been the books. Otherwise, I'm talking about this stuff or talking to people who have this stuff. And as I see a new need for a book come up, I'll tackle it. But I look at my life now as being a full-time coach. And 15 years ago, if you told me when I was an egomaniac, person who you did not want to be around, if you would have told me I was doing this, I would have laughed and probably made some kind of homosexual slur about myself. And now I am happier and healthier than I've ever been. And instead of giving a speech to 1,000 people, I get even more out of sitting here and working one on one with somebody week after week on their issues.
Well, the impact that we make one on one, and I say this all the time, it's not about the numbers, it's about that one on one actually helping and giving tools and tips to one person at a time. Even if you talk to 100 people, 3 people are going home with something that they got from that conference. Not all 100 of them, they're going to say, oh, well, I went to this conference, I went to this talk, this guy was speaking about this woman was speaking about that, but I wasn't my cup of tea, and
Yeah.
and then they leave, right? And then you go to the next one and the next one, and you're getting roughly 3 out of 100 that are getting something from it. So one-on-one is really deeply important. We got to stop worrying about all these big numbers, and we got to really
Yeah.
just take the time to make an impact by doing this one-on-one. And as I just said, not my cup of tea. So I want to get into the tea. Our hour is running really fast. So Josh, if I give you the word tea, what 3 words would you give me this morning?
Well, I do like the idea of T standing for tenacity. I feel like, whatever's been thrown at me in life, I have tended to tackle it, and I've tended to make it into something better and tried to make my life or the world a better place with it. And I am not easily knocked down. And that's something that, despite all of the bad decisions I've made in my life, which would fill 3 or 4 more books, um, I, I get back up and I keep fighting. So the T is definitely tenacity. The E for myself is definitely educator. My parents were both school teachers, so I grew up in a very an environment where education was very important. And while I never wanted to be a teacher, um, I've heard from so many people who have read my books, who have heard my interviews, how I have helped them along the way, even if I haven't worked with them one on one. And it's made me realize that there is a teaching side to me. There's an educating side to me. So I would put E as educator, and with the A, I think that that this was the one that I was thinking about, and it's yeah, that's the one I'm having trouble with because I gotta be honest with you, I keep wanting to go back to asshole because that's kind
That's
of
okay because it's your tea, Josh.
I have to remind myself that for so many years I was not a good person to be around. I was an egotist. I was a opportunist. I was completely full of myself. And the thing that people have to realize is that just because you drop an addiction doesn't mean you fundamentally change as a person. I always tell people if you like chocolate ice cream as an addict, you're gonna like chocolate ice cream in recovery. If you like action movies as an addict, you're gonna like them in recovery. And if you're an insufferable ass to be around as an addict, you're still going to be that way in recovery. And I have had to do a lot of work on myself. I've had to, work on my empathy. I've had to work on my, listening skills. I've had to work on my, interpersonal relations with a lot of people that I developed poorly in my life for a variety of reasons. And I have to kind of remind myself that, it's still easier for me to be an asshole than for me to be a perfectly nice person. And reminding myself to be a nice person is something that has to stay top of mind because uh, I just, whether it's nature or time or whatever it is, I can drift into being a nasty person way too easily.
Well, and this is why we serve a strong tea, right? We serve ourselves, the authenticity. And I really want to thank you for serving a strong tea, Josh, because Joshua, it's your tea. It's what you serve in life. And you're being honest and you're being authentic right now. And you're saying, you know what? I could still be an asshole. I had this addiction. I went for help. I'm recovered. Recovery, but I can still be an asshole at times. It's easy for me to become that asshole. It's easy for me to go back to that chocolate ice cream, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and we have to really understand this. An addiction, trauma, it doesn't change who we are.
Right.
It's part of us, right? So we go back to what we're used to, what we're comfortable with, and maybe being an asshole is what you're comfortable being, because maybe that's what you were
Well,
given as a child, was a lot of assholes, so you became an asshole, and we really have to start just being okay with who we are as individuals. And on my platform, we serve good, strong, authentic teas here. We don't serve any of this hogwash, sugar-coated stuff. We share the good stuff. Miss Liz is not a sugar-coated woman. I will tell you like it is. I am a survivor myself, and I don't want to be sugar-coated with sweet words. I want the true, authentic person at my table. I want to serve true authenticity to my listeners, to my audience, because we need to start being authentic. We need to stop the mask. We need to stop covering stuff up. And this is why we have these topics. We have porn addiction, we have betrayal, because this is happening in everyday life. This is happening around the globe. It's not just happening in the United States, not just happening in Canada. It's happening around the globe. People are being betrayed. People are living with trauma. People are living with addictions. We need to really start speaking on these topics and speaking with them without fear. When you came out, Joshua, and you went to recovery, how did your family react to you coming out with everything?
It really depends who it was. There were people who, this is a bit of a joke, but, when I say I'm going off to rehab for alcoholism, people slap you on the back and call you a hero. When you say at least 10 years ago that you're going off to deal with your pornography problem, they don't slap you on the back. They go looking for the hand sanitizer because of how sexually related disorders may be. But I think by just being out there writing these books, talking about this stuff, hitting, a few hundred people, a few thousand people when I do things like this at a time is helping. The one-on-one I'm doing with people is helping. My mom has never listened to a single podcast I've done or a single TV appearance I've been on. She's never read one of my books. I think deep down, she doesn't want to believe that her little prince could possibly have ever been a porn addict, despite the fact this is what I do with my days full time. Um, Whereas, my father is fascinated by this topic and that I was this and I was this under their noses. And he asks plenty of questions and he reads everything that I do and he listens to a lot of the stuff. It really depends, I think, on who you were in my family, who you were among my friend group, um, how you want to see me, how you want to move forward. And for the most part, since I caused this issue, since I caused this awkwardness, I just go with whatever they want to do. I don't force the issue on my mother. I don't force the issue on any of my friends. If they want to talk about it, I do. If they don't want to talk about it, it's a great big world. And we can talk about other things.
Well, I think that's kind of a awareness as well. The taboo of mom not wanting to, the
Yep.
denial. Like I myself as a mom, if my son would tell me, I would be like, I don't want to hear it. I don't
Yep.
want to know it. I think it's just a mom thing, right?
I think you're
Uh,
right.
we're just like not our babies. Not we always see our kids, no matter how big you get, you're still that little baby that we held like this. So I think it's just a mom thing. I think
Yeah.
it's just that,
I
you
gave
know,
her some grandkids, so she has to have some idea of what
how
I've
they
done at
came,
least a
right?
couple times in my life.
Well, that's it, right? We had to turn to sex to have babies. And we really have to talk about the bees, you
Yeah.
know? We don't talk about that anymore. We kind of keep that hush hush. Josh, what final message do you have for the viewers today?
I just want them to, through listening to all of this, I don't want them to think that there's no way that they could not have a problem if they're asking themselves about it. There's no way that their kid or their spouse couldn't, because they're not that kind of person. I have to tell you, porn addiction is like any other addiction, where it doesn't know any boundaries, whether that's gender or age or income or religion or where you live. Anybody can be a porn addict. I think we still have this mindset of porn addicts are these 19-year-old guys who never have kissed a girl in real life, or it's the freaky 60-year-old guy who runs through the park wearing a trench coat, flashing people. And Lord knows they probably are porn addicts. But I have met professionals, doctors, lawyers, nurses, men, women, people from age 15 up to their 70s. I've met rich people, poor people, smart people, stupid people. There is no stereotypical porn addict. If you're questioning yourself, do you have an issue? Well, questioning yourself if you have an issue is one of the symptoms of having an issue. I'm sure you don't ever ask yourself, gee, do I vacuum too much? Do I have an addiction? You don't, because you know you don't. So if you're asking yourself if you have an addiction, look into it, because you cannot be disqualified from being a porn addict. Nobody can.
So, Josh, if anybody wanted to reach you, how could they reach you?
Best way to do it is through my website, which you have here on the screen, paddictrecovery.com. That's letter paddictrecovery.com, or on both TikTok and Instagram. My screen name on there is That Corn Coach. And those are the best ways to reach me.
That's what I forgot. I forgot that. I was always putting corn coach in, and I was like, I can't find this boy. Where is he?
That Corn Coach, because I just happened to be watching that 90s show, not the 70s show, but the 90s show, the new one on Netflix. I happened to be watching that when I had to come up with a new screen name, so that became part of it.
So before we wrap up, we got less than 5 minutes here. I want to get into your favorite color. You gave me purple. Why purple?
I don't know, but literally going back to elementary school, it's
Oh,
always been purple. Um, and I really do think it's beautiful. I really do like its softness. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think going back to even elementary school, I may have been gaslighting people with that, because if you're a guy and you say you like pink or purple, you're going to get a girl's attention. And what do I care what my favorite color is? If saying to you and getting your attention will me be saying, well, pink is my favorite color. Oh, really, Josh? Well, that's so interesting. Okay, Josh is interesting. So I have to say pink is my favorite color. That's the kind of manipulation that even in as a 10, 12-year old I was doing in my head. I should have had a PhD in gaslighting before I ever got out of high school, because that's the way my mind operated. And pulling that apart has been probably the biggest part of recovery. Asking myself, am I being genuine, or am I giving answers hoping that I'll have some manufactured result I'm looking for? So, yes, legitimately, purple is my favorite color. I think it might have just been an answer I came up with way back in the day.
I like that you brought that up, because when we look at colors right away, everyone, oh, you like purple, you like pink, oh, there's something up with you, you're interesting, like you said.
Yeah.
Why can't we not just like a color?
Yeah.
Our eyes like certain things, you know, other than other things, and we don't always have to put a reason behind it. And
Right.
that's why I asked this question, colors, because I'm always intrigued with colors, on why people like certain colors. I also asked you the one word to describe yourself as an individual, and you gave me perseverance. Can you tell me why?
Because I have it tattooed down the front of my right leg, so I
Oh,
feel like I have. If I'm branding, I have to keep up with that. But no, I mean, I have had so much happen to me. Even my son yesterday, I was telling him a story of when I was traveling at one point, and this weird mess I got into. And you have had one of the most interesting lives, but all of your stories end up with you doing something stupid or getting in trouble, or, having to get yourself out of a situation. You really have had an interesting life, but I don't know that I would want to have it. And I think that, yeah, you just persevere through it. I tend to step in piles of shit a lot, or I used to, and spent a lot of my life wiping shit off my feet. And that's perseverance. I did it again. Time to wipe it off again and keep going, because that's all you can do.
I like that motto in life. You get yourself in shit and just wipe it off and continue on.
Yeah.
We all get ourselves in shit if we're being authentic with ourselves and we're being real with ourselves. We all have shit sandwiches. We all have done something that we shouldn't have done. We've all hurt somebody, whether it's a loved one or a friend. We've all been through a shit. And I really want to thank you, Josh, for joining me today and sharing the real strong tea, of tenacity, educator, and asshole. You know, each tea is different. We serve differently. We bring different to the table. We bring different flavors and blends. And this is how we make a difference, by sharing different teas. Uh, I will be back this afternoon at 3 p.m. and then again at 7 p.m. And the next guest that I have coming up is Ed Corin, and we'll be talking about Crohn's disease. Another topic that we don't really talk about. And then we're going to wrap it up at 7 p.m. with Miranda O with Chins Up, Tits Out. That's right. This Thursday is all about sex, sex, sex.
I was going to say, you're bookending your day pretty well today.
This Thursday, we are talking about sexuality. We are talking about addictions. We are talking about attitudes and how we make a difference. So again, I'll see everybody at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check out Miss Liz's YouTube channel if you'd like to see these live shows. You can watch them at any time, replay, and hashtag where you're tuning in from, because I always like to see where you're tuning in. And I will see everybody at 3 p.m. And until then, serve your tea.